another episode on Awaz-e-Haqiqat that also translates to the voice of truth. I'm your host, Chris Malika Bhadra, and depending on which of the part of the world you're listening to me today or tonight, I'll be talking about marital rape. As simple as that word sounds, it's just marital rape, something that needs to be discussed more often than not. But I thought it's critical that I have this discussion with the South Asian male, just to have his insights, his point of view, and what this person thinks about this ongoing issue. And with me, I have Nikhil Damodaran. So Nikhil is an economist with the economics department at the University of Melbourne. His primary job is to teach basic economics to undergrad students. And in his research, he focuses on macroeconomics of governments. That is how their spending and financing affects the economy's GDP. Nikhil is also interested in looking at governments from a historical perspective. That is how the evolution of governments and their policies is the result of economic motivations, among other things. For example, most of the governments go for privatization, not as a way to switch ownership or operation from public to private, but rather as a way to get quick money and easy budgetary. Nikhil also is a dad to two loving kids, and I think he enjoys running. So on that note, good afternoon, Nikhil. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
No. This thanks is all to you, Nikhil, because this is a very important topic, as you must have realized, and getting a South Asian male often becomes a challenge. So thanks to you for saying yes and coming on board and speaking to me.
Yes, no, this is an important issue. That's why I said without any hesitation, I think I should talk about this.
Thank you.
The only hesitation probably that I had was whether I be the representative South Asian male. So my views will be mine. So with that caveat, I would try to paint a picture of a representative South Asian male, which is not very good, but I will try to see it from the other side also.
Thank you, Nikhil. It's just a starting point, as I said. Somewhere we have to start this discussion. So
yeah.
First things first, Nikhil, why are we still discussing about marital rape in the 21st century?
So ideally, we should be in a society where these things just happen overnight and women are liberated at the same time as men are, and liberation is gender neutral and caste or creed or other things neutral, but that is not the way we live.
Yeah.
Social change takes time, especially if you're a woman. It takes longer time for some reason, and that is why we are still here talking about issues such as which involve women equality and issues which are more severe and more personal, such as marital rape. If I think about it, I think people who try to dictate about agency are not the ones who are demanding agency. Maybe I think that is one way to think about why women are left out in the process.
Right.
So that's sort of the broad discussion here. But as an economist, from an economist's perspective, we are still thinking about this because the economic associations with women were very recent, much more recent. So they did not have this kind of a power to, bring in the money and bring in the finances to be made economically worthy of a discussion in which agency was being distributed to people. So hence, I mean, from many perspectives, they've been lagging behind, and it's not just women's, but also men who thought, okay, they don't have agency, why to include them? So it's also, the onus is also on men because they distributed it either wrongly or they were the ones who distributed it in the first place. So from all perspectives, I think.
Nikhil, you brought about two things. One is agency and one is economic liberation for women, right?
Yeah.
When you say that women's liberation has been a slow process, I'm sure it's not only the economic liberation that's one factor, right? There have been many other factors. How has that dynamic changed? Like when you look at governments, not keeping the governments aside, how has the dynamic changed in a household? Like now women is earning. They were earning before also, but that has been at slow tide. But how has the agency or the narrative changed?
Um, well, with money, you have associated liabilities and you have associated benefits.
Hmm.
The liability being that within the social context, a woman has to earn and also has to do household chores.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's liberation in a true sense of the terms because they're still doing both the work.
Yeah.
It's not as if work has been reduced or has been substituted. It's just meaning that it's stopping up. But on the other hand, um, the fact that I now have a say in how much household income is generated is has helped me uh, give me go to the other side that hey, this is a fantastic. I can now make my own decisions of which rice to buy. It might be very trivial, but at least I have that sense of power which
Yeah.
comes with earning money and being employed. You also get exposed to a different work culture. I
Yeah.
mean, earlier you were a part of a family system where the only institution you interacted with was the family.
Hmm.
But now you're interacting with a whole new set of institutions, new set of rules, and navigating through them, getting this money. And then, so the institutions are interacting with each other and creating somewhat of um, a mental challenge
Right.
in, say, the participating women's mind. And I think that is what is causing her to ask these questions, and rightly so. I mean, um, this should have happened earlier, but yeah, that's the way it was.
Nikhil, one more question. When I talk about South Asia, in some of the South Asian countries, a major chunk of the not major, but some of the chunk of the population is still below the poverty line, right?
Yeah,
And many of the households where the partner, the male is an alcoholic. So the woman is not only fending for the children, they have multiple children, she's going to the work, she's looking after the partner, and then she's also getting abused physically, mentally, and emotionally. But she's also earning. So in that
yeah,
household, that narrative still hasn't changed because she has that financial power, but she's
yeah.
also getting that fair share of abuse. So how do we empower those households in this regard?
Uh, I mean, this idea of empowerment, particularly with money, is very nuanced.
Hmm.
You can't just think of women as earning money and being empowered automatically. It also depends on how much money, what position vis-a-vis the male, how is the general well-being of the family taking place, and so on. Um, so, for instance, poor households with poor men who earn less and women also who earn less, uh, situations tend to occur that women typically earn lesser than men
Yeah.
in general. That's, say, let's think about that as the first category. In that, their agency is just on the margin that, okay, I earn some money, I can make some decisions, but then they won't venture into making the crucial decisions where the man's authority is challenged in any sense
Correct.
because they're still on the margins. Now let's think of a scenario where the woman is earning significant and if equal, if not more,
Hmm.
even still in a poor household.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even then, her agency might or her authority might be slightly higher than the one who was earning lesser, but still the social context in that poor neighborhood would be one where the man is still the dominant partner, and the society itself in the kind of neighborhood that I live in, where everybody is living in, will dictate that, okay, these are my limits, so as to speak, unless and until she observes an aberration that, hey, this is what's happening, and there are women who are doing this. So it's economics, the society around it, and how much you are using that, and in what context you're using. I mean, you would be willing to use it, but
Hmm.
might be forced not to use it. Violence is a simple case which you illustrated. So I don't know. This is a bit complicated
Yeah.
to unearth the
Yeah.
whole thing, but yeah, it can have layers, and you can think more about not just the poor women. You can think about the middle class, and then there is different dynamics in the middle class and the
Yeah.
upper class, and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Thank you, Nikhil. I'll come back to the fact that I was doing my research for this conversation, Nikhil, and I found out that um, in some of the South Asian countries, unfortunately, even to this date, marital rape is not criminalized.
Yeah.
What could be some of the factors behind this not being criminalized yet?
Um, uh, the earlier questions were easier to handle as an economist because they had an economic context here.
Yeah.
But from a legal perspective, I absolutely have no context. So I can think from an analytical perspective that, hey, there were these framers of law,
Mm.
and most of the laws were inherited from the colonial thing. If
Yes.
the country was colonized, in that case, there's very little mention of women, or the gendered aspect of it was completely ignored.
Mm.
But as I recall, I think there have been laws which have had fundamental equality in place. So it's not as if the laws per se are not equal or prescribe a less equal treatment to women. It's just that they haven't been interpreted the way that they could be in ways which are important. And also, amenders of the law, as and when these cases come up, amenders of the law have not particularly been helpful, because there have been also men who are ruling on issues affected by women, for women, and so on. And they haven't had particular interest in um, turning it as we speak, because they would use the case by case resolution rather than give an overarching picture, if I can sort of summarize it. Because if you give an overarching picture, then you are forcing a societal change from a legal perspective. But if you're ruling a case by case basis, then you're saying, oh, there is no merit to extension of this. In this case, you had power. In this case,
Right.
this
Right.
was the right, and so on. So restricting that judgment to uh, and it depends also on subsequent uses of the judgment. Like if there's a precedent set that the women is um, empowered and there is this provision,
Yeah.
how much will you be able to use that provision is something which mean I don't know from an
Yeah.
analytical perspective, or even an empirical perspective. Okay, how many cases were there, and so on, and why did it not have a blanket criminalization ban on it? There, in addition, the legal part of the society is not isolated. It's always a reflection of the kind of things that we are
Yeah.
thinking about. So the culture of uh, well, subservience of women is already there. So I am not surprised that there haven't been cases where or there have been significant cases. I'm not surprised that there aren't many.
Right.
That is one thing. Uh, Also, politics and economics does come into these things, but then I'll sort of leave the discussion to later so that we can
Yeah.
pick up these
Sure.
threads.
Nikhil, I wanted to bring up consent a bit later, but I think this is the right time, right? So further on to this research, as you mentioned, not from a legal perspective, but just as a human, I got curious to know why wasn't this criminalized? So somewhere I read, and this was a research from a couple of years ago, it said that some people believe that if this were to be criminalized, then it would kind of destroy the social fabric on which South Asian marriages are based. Now, from a purely South Asian perspective, not from an illegal or economist perspective. My concern was that what is the fabric isn't based on? Because if is consent being completely ignored? Because if a marriage is based on something as coercive as I want it, you have to give it to me, then is it not a very deranged fabric in the first place? Is my question.
Um, Consent. So again, all of these are results of evolution. So first, let me address the idea of why this cultural criticism is thrown to marital rape.
Mm.
Um, the argument that is presented is, if you ask questions about marital rape and consent and so on, it will hurt our institution, the other big institution which South Asians pride upon themselves, the institution
Right.
of marriage.
Right. Yeah.
And their counter argument is very funny. The counter argument is, look at the Western concept of marriage. There are so many divorces. There is um, uh, so much of a lack of marriage from their cultural fabric sense, that you don't want to be like that. So you want the marriage as an institution to be preserved. And if you want the marriage as an institution to be preserved, you are bringing in aspects of marital rape which may ruffle some feathers.
Right.
So preservation of the old culture is what prevents you to have discussion in the first place,
Mm.
I think which is very silly, because you are then acknowledging that there is merit in the old culture and whatever it be. Um, but so that's where the discussion starts. Now, why are we not thinking more about consent? I think ideally that issue is that consent is, I mean, I have no clue of why this hasn't been discussed from a marital perspective.
Mm.
Um, from a women's perspective, I can think of why I don't fight about consent, because uh, conventionally, women who can handle, or the ability to handle families or to nurture families, was the women's onus.
Mm.
So if you are in a divorced family, it's the women who did not do right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so because society say, okay, the man does his job of earning money, the women, the only job she has to do is to take care of the family and
Right.
be the cohesive unit. So you are putting that burden of trying to do whatever it can to keep the family unit together on the women,
Right.
which is why um, that is my objective, even if I'm raped a couple of times, I think since my objective is that, I should not complain. So you see, the way the social structure is framed on women is itself preventing her not to ask questions about consent or not to ask questions about other things. And invariably, there is this question of kids
Yeah.
together, because so you don't want to disrupt the family because it has effect on kids and so on. So where the woman's individuality or your existence is subservient to the needs of the family,
Mm.
and hence there is no merit to you thinking about what you want to do in the relationship.
Right. Right.
That's sort of my broad brush on this. I have a few other points also which I can think about.
Mm.
For instance, from a Western concept, a relation is approached from both the parties involved, and what
Yeah.
am I getting here? And in South Asian context, the both parties' behavior is not really, then the family becomes the behavioral unit, and
Yeah.
the household optimization becomes the behavioral
Mm.
sort of nuance here. So that is why women somehow are on the back burner among with this other things,
Yeah.
such as no financial uh,
Independence.
ability and so on and so forth.
Nikhil, you spoke about women not kind of asking the questions which we should have had about, because we are tired with family, children, and all of that, right? Now, I want to ask, since you're speaking with me, what about men? Are men asking the questions? Are they asking the correct questions?
Men asking questions. So men are taught not to ask a lot of questions about these things by other men.
Okay.
And it is a boys' circle, like, I mean, how many of us would discuss topics like this with our colleagues, would engage in issues where you share this idea with your colleagues about,
Right.
hey, what do you do in such a situation, and so on, or even generally thinking about advice, let alone that this is a man-to-man conversation. So conversations like this between men is actually not the conversation to have. You cannot have, I don't remember having such a conversation with any of my male colleagues. Yes, well,
No.
I have a couple of exceptional friends. So barring them. Um, but yeah, men are not designed to think that. I mean, it's not designed. The society, in some sense, doesn't. Um, well, there is lack of self-awareness
Mm.
potentially because women are subservient. So
Yeah.
I don't think of their well-being from
Mm.
a. You see, it's all designed to be very patriarchal. So that's why I'm having trouble even answering this question because, every way that I'm thinking from a conventional man's perspective, I'm thinking, hey, do I talk to my friends? Oh no, they will ridicule me. Do I talk to my wife? Oh no, I don't need to do that. So all these answers are preventing me
From
to self-reflect on this issue
Mm.
and also preventing me from engaging in a broader discussion. So this is me being a reflective, educated man. Forget about that regular and there are toils also generally for people. So this is all of this reflection is happening outside of your work life, your
Yeah. Yeah.
livelihoods, and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So the social structure is different. Me as a profession, I need to think. So I can think about these issues, but generally, I don't know how many people will have the self-reflection in general,
Mm.
uh, or even if they have, there is this um, lack of acceptance of, okay, I need that, or maybe the role of women's is not even that important for me to have that kind of reflection. I'm
Right.
trying to draw it to the extreme because want to sort of go touch on all types of men
Exactly.
and all sides.
Thank you, Nikhil. Now I'm trying to think like a man, right? So if I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
man, I'm in a Western country. I've been brought up with good etiquettes and mannerisms, whatever. I've been married. If I see in the case of that I'm trying to force myself on my partner, right? She doesn't want it, I want it, she's tired, whatever. She is reluctant, she's giving in, but do I see that pleasure? I don't. But I'm just doing it because I want it. So how how am I getting that satisfaction where my partner does not have a smile on her face? She's just being forced because I'm forcing her to do it every night or whichever night I want it. So my question to you, Nikhil, is then in that case, for a privileged man, for a relatively aware man, does consent become a very gray zone because he's himself made it a gray zone? What happens in the bedroom in those situations is what I'm trying to gauge.
Okay, yeah. No, this is a scenario which I've played out, and because we were thinking about this issue, I was thinking, okay, what is the ideal scenario here?
Hmm.
The ideal scenario is that I want to have sex,
Yeah.
my wife wants to have sex, we have sex.
Yeah.
That's the ideal scenario. Well, it might not be wife, it can be partner or any,
Yeah.
just to generalize the whole thing. But practically, does this happen? This doesn't happen. And also, okay, let's think about practically in reality. I want to have sex, my wife wants to have sex, but that doesn't coincide. It could be Monday, say I want to have sex, Wednesday, my wife wants to have sex. So that doesn't coincide,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It could be the case that such days are more where the consent part doesn't coincide.
Hmm.
In which case, ideally, if there is a relationship which is healthy, you want to do it consensually, you would work towards building a way where there is consensual thing.
Yeah.
And this implies that you are talking about this urge and you're saying, hey, part of it is physical, part of it is emotional,
Yes.
part of it is existence, and so on. So it's a very complex dynamic. So you need to have a space where both of you consensually come together and you have sex. But does this happen often all the time? But this is an ideal scenario where both are aware of this, the place it has in satisfying you physically, satisfying you emotionally or
Yeah.
mentally or whatever, uh, and then acting upon it, maybe narrowing it down. And you should know that with age, the sexual drive changes. In teenage years, you'll have high sexual drive. Then the overlaps can be higher. As you age, overlaps can be smaller. So it has various dimensions. The consent itself has various dimensions related to age, related to work life, related to stress, and all of that. Like, especially in the era that we are living in, you are stressed, you want sex, you are stressed, hence you don't want sex. So it can be both.
Yeah.
So I mean, the overlap of consent is a tricky concept,
Mm.
and we need to, there is no other way, because everybody responds to stress, anxiety, troubles differently, and
Yeah.
sex can be different things to different people. I
Yeah.
mean, I can find pleasure in sex, some people might not. Right? There is that category that sex can just be a chore that I want to satisfy a bodily need. I necessarily don't find it as pleasurable
Mm.
as people make out to be. That's the ideal scenario,
Yeah.
but realistically, I think there is this partner dynamics. Even if make it gender neutral, the idea of consent, there is this dominant partner, there is this subservient partner. So the dominant partner's needs, or um, the space of consent, would override the subservient
Yeah.
partner's consent, and this is what happens generally. You can theorize it a bit more deeply about what other factors are important, when is it important, and what is the result of it. But I mean, this is enough theorization about sex.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just trying to absorb everything, and it's
Yeah.
so deep because I think a few years ago I was on one of the Facebook groups, and I read this report by an anonymous person. Obviously, I think it was a female, and she said that I was sleeping, and I was just my partner came in and he had sex, and I was sleeping, and to me that's like gross alienation of consent, right? Your partner is asleep, you can at least ask. But Nikhil, the next point is often since marital rape is mostly skewed towards women, a lot of people come up to me and say, oh, men also get raped. I'm not saying they don't. Again, it's a very general neutral point. But what is your view on this women versus men? This is not a battle, right? Battle of the sexes. But if you have to see it from a gender neutral point of view lens, then how do you perceive marital rape to be?
How do you perceive marital rape to be?
From a gender neutral point of view.
Okay. I mean, uh, if you're thinking of um, rape in general, it is the result of the one of the dominant partners forcing their will on the subservient partner here. That partner can be, this relationship can be gender neutral from a perspective. So um I mean, it's bad on all fronts.
Mm.
If I am playing the devil's advocate, and I am thinking about, okay, I am the dominant partner, I'm going to force myself on my partner no matter what, then you should understand that over time the merits of that dominance will reduce,
Okay.
because your your partner will feel violated,
Mm.
and that violation might not manifest into instant divorce. It will not. In most cases it doesn't. In most cases it is this very minute shedding of respect, which over time builds into a total lack of um, well, I don't care about you kind of a scenario.
Right.
So it's not easy to observe that. It's not easy to repair that also. You will have cases where, oh, you did this, and but it got repaired due to other positive things that you do and so on. But you will see there will be aspects of your partner's life to which you will not be able to dwell into because of such activities that you're
Mm.
doing on the other hand. So you will, and it will affect your relationship. It even for your own self, if you're doing this in your bedroom, you should realize that in the end it's going to play out in the long term as a dynamics which you would never expect to. To that, there is an interesting statistic that I was looking up. uh, Divorce at the later stages of life is often an indication of these chipping away things which have come to surface. And this is happening new. Uh, Now people who are 60s or 50s or 60s are actually very well settled now. They weren't back then.
Yeah.
Now they have the agency and the realization times have changed. You say, I'm filing for divorce, it's done. So you will not be able to see it coming because it's a relationship. You can't really quantify everything. It's an emotional beast, and you need to sort of approach it from the right perspective every day. And so that is so I mean that is one perspective that I can have, and this is a gender neutral perspective.
Mm.
It it can be a man and a woman. It can be a man and a man, or a
Right.
woman and a woman, or anything.
One very simple question, Nikhil.
Yeah.
So we keep talking about consent, consent, consent. If someone who, let's assume, has no idea about consent, right?
Yeah.
How should consent sound like? Yes, no, is maybe a no, is I don't think so a no. How can we simplify this consent, basically?
Um, so uh, so actually this is not an easy question per se. If I think about it, um, you know, um, I remember when we used to play cricket, and I don't feel like going for cricket matches all the time. My friends say, come, let's go for the team, come for the team, and so on. We will lose a batsman, and so do that and so on. So this is coercing consent,
Mhm.
right? A similar thing happens in relationships.
Okay.
You are badgering to the extent that, oh, today is the day, let's do it. So you are coercing. I don't know whether this is consent or not. I don't know how far the other person believes, okay, your coercement is me accepting because let's do it,
Mm.
or me accepting because it's my consent and I want to do it. I mean, there is a gray area of whose will is converted into actions.
Okay.
But if a clear no from a legal standpoint, if I say a clear verbal no, or even a body language no, I think it should be clear enough that there is lack of consent. This is more important for relationships which are at the earlier stage of their development, especially if I'm meeting my girlfriend and I'm requesting sex and she says no, and that is a stage. It becomes Marital rape becomes a different beast altogether due to various reasons, due to the nuances which happen in a bedroom, which is like happens all the time. This discussion and this trying to come into a zone where you can both accommodate each other's needs and so on. And so that's, I think, my take on consent, and how gray can it be and how black and white can it be. It can be both.
Right. Thanks, Nikhil. Well, to me, this is not a one-off conversation, honestly. We need to have these conversations periodically, but somewhere I'm mindful of time. But before I let you go, Nikhil, what would be your message to our listeners?
uh, I think message to listeners in general is um, to discuss such concepts more,
Mm.
to just even from an abstract perspective. And I am someone who works on economic theory. So my main job is to just think of hypothetical ideas which can arise in economics, model them mathematically, and see what happens. It is a very good thought tool. You think of yourself hypothetically in situations where you like, then you can imagine what the other person does.
Right.
So have that exercise in your own self. Discuss the outcomes of these exercises with your peers. That way, you will have more response from where your mental metric of, okay, how the woman feels or how the man feels is different from reality. And you will see that these differences are very empirical, in the sense that you would have had a notion in your mind which you thought never existed. Oh, this is no, I know she likes it. So you need to know whether she likes it or not, or he likes it or not, and bridge that gap between what you think and what is.
Yeah.
And I think discussion, just having a discussion with everyone matters. And here also, I think discussion should not be very uh, it's not an easy way to think about discussions, because if you're discussing, invariably you're going to discuss within your own groups, so within your own society, in your own community, and so on. And often communities can um, increase the kind of bias which goes against some women and some relationships.
Right.
So you should also talk outside your community. Talk to your school colleagues, talk to your tuition colleagues, talk to your office work colleagues, talk to women in your workplace, especially about these issues. So because you want to catch very wide perspectives here,
Right.
and you want to learn from those perspectives for you to make an informed decision about things. Because if I am in a community where everybody is women is subservient, I ask anybody, that issue will not resonate with them. In fact, I might not even ask them. So from a listener perspective, I hope there is this wide net which can be caught, and you can capture many people in these ideas, and just discuss. And there's no plus and minus or association with. In fact, till the time you haven't done such things, you are actually in an open frame to actually think about anything.
Yeah.
Because that, even a perverse thing such as rape, if you are thinking through it, makes it half the battle, because then you are being aware of what you are doing to yourself, what you're doing to the other person, and the implications of it, because you're starting the conversation. So this is more important, I think, to just start.
One more question I have for you, and that is, how do we get more men on the table to come and start talking, as you mentioned?
I don't know the answer to this. How do I change locker room conversations? Uh, Maybe watch less of sports channels and read more of Guardian. Yeah.
Now, all right. Thanks, Nikhil. This was a very important conversation, and I can't thank you enough for agreeing to this. And
Thank you so much for inviting me. And
all the thanks go to you, Nikhil, because this was such a sensitive information, and to our listeners, this can be triggering. So if you feel that your mental health is being at unrest, please step out of the conversation and do what you need to do to take care of your mental health first. And if you've heard me for a while, I hope you like the content. And if you've heard us for the first time, I really hope that you had a lot to take away from Nikhil's words, expertise, and his general observation. And this was a very generic discussion, but we need to be having these discussions in a more periodic fashion, because there needs to be more awareness. Nikhil, if anyone wants to connect with you or just wants to have a chat with you, where can we find you on social media?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn. I am on Twitter. Social media, I don't use it as much. I might not be very active. So to have a conversation, I think you just have to reach out to me through my email. University of Melbourne profile is available to everyone, and that is a good place to be. But yeah, you can add me on LinkedIn and
Sure.
and other platforms. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope we can have you in the future for many other such relevant conversations. Thank you.
Yes. All the best for